Praise the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and grace and peace to everybody here in Jesus' name. Viewing Bible Christians on YouTube. Alright, what we're going to deal with today, we're going to deal with something called the spirit and the soul. The spirit and the soul. We're going to clear up a couple of things. A lot of people believe that when you die, your spirit goes off to the Lord in heaven, and your soul also goes off to the Lord in heaven. And they said the body's in like 3 different parts. You have the spirit, you have the soul, you have the body. But we're going to see exactly what this is talking about. Now, the spirit in the Bible comes in many different forms. We know that God is a spirit. We know that angel spirits. We also know that the words that Jesus spoke, he said to you that his words are spirit in our life. But the spirit we're going to deal with is the spirit that returns to God when you die. Because it is something that go back to God. But a lot of people believe that the spirit or the soul is something a part of you. But what we're going to deal with, let's find out what is that spirit that returns to God. We're going to start off in Ecclesiastes chapter 12, because this is the verse that a lot of people use kind of incorrectly. Ecclesiastes chapter 12, we're going to start at verse 7. When you get there, go ahead.
Then shall the dust return to the earth as it was, and the spirit shall return unto God who gave it.
Alright, now it says that the dust shall return unto the earth as it was. When you die, you go back to the dust. Exactly. Everything dies, goes back to dust. You see some roadkill on the side of the road, 2 or 3 weeks later, only thing you're going to see is bones and dust. Why? Because everything living turns back to dust, because we were made from dust. But it's also said, and the spirit shall return unto God who gave it. Alright, we need to clarify exactly what that spirit is. So to do that, let's go back to Genesis chapter 2. When God made man, this is everything that God put into man. There was, and it's all here in Genesis chapter 2. So we're going to find out what this spirit is. Genesis chapter 2, we're going to read verse 7. When you get there, go ahead.
And the Lord formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living soul.
Alright, now right off the bat, this is everything it took to create man. Dust of the ground, and then after he became a dead soul at this point, he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. So before that breath of life got into his nostrils, he became a living soul. Now notice it didn't say anything that man was in 3 parts. It didn't say anything about him being a body, a soul, and a spirit. Only thing we know that he was made from dust. He became a dead soul once he formed him. That was the body, which the soul is the body. We'll clarify that in this lesson. And then God breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. Now let's see what a spirit is. Go to Job chapter 27. Job chapter 27. And we'll read verses 1 through 4. So in the beginning, only thing we know, we have the soul and the breath of life. And once he got the breath of life into his nostrils, he became a living soul. You take away that breath, he's a dead soul. Pretty simple, not too complicated. We just make things more complicated than it really is. Job chapter 27, we're going to start at verse 1. When you get there, go ahead.
Moreover, Job continued his parable, and said, As God liveth, who hath taken away my judgment, and the Almighty who hath vexed my soul. All the while my breath is in me, and the Spirit of God is in my nostrils, my lips shall not speak wickedness, nor my tongue utter deceit.
Alright, now notice he said, all the while my breath was in me, and the Spirit of God in my nostrils. What Spirit of God he's talking about? Is this some living entity dancing around on your nose hairs? No. Not at all. Only thing is the breath you breathe. That's the Spirit of God. That's what gives you life. Even in the hospital, once you stop breathing, you are considered dead. And that's what God takes back. Because that's the very thing he gave you to live. He breathed into Adam's nostrils the breath of life. He became what? A living soul. So as long as we're breathing, that's the Spirit of God that's causing us to live. That's the Spirit that God takes back when you die. The breath of life. That's the Spirit that returns to God. Let's go to Genesis chapter 7. Genesis chapter 7. And we're going to read verses 21 through 23. Let's see what happened when the Lord flooded the earth. Let's see if he talks about this Spirit of God or this breath of life. Genesis chapter 7, verses 21. And we're going to read verses 21 through 23. When you get there, go ahead.
And all flesh died that moved upon the earth, both of fowl and of cattle, and of beasts, and of every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, and every man. And all in whose nostrils was the breath of life, of all that was in the dry land died. And every living thing, and every living substance was destroyed, which was upon the face of the ground, both man and cattle, and the creeping things, and the fowl of the heaven. And they were destroyed from the earth, and Noah only remained alive, and they that were with him in the ark.
So he's telling them that when he flooded the earth, everything that was on dry land all died, in whose nostrils was the breath of life. So God took away their breath, and it became dead souls. They didn't live anymore. Why? Because God took away their breath. That's the spirit that's returned unto God. That's what Job was talking about. That's why in Ecclesiastes it says, we all die and turn back to death, and the spirit of God, or the breath of life, returned to God who gave it. That's the only thing that returned to God. Everything else is in the grave. And we're going to talk about the soul also. Now remember, we read that the Almighty vexed the soul of Job. What happened to Job? His body got vexed. This is the soul, your body. He had sores. He had all types of things messing with him because of what the Lord allowed Satan to do. That's why the Almighty vexed his soul. If you got the chicken pox, your soul was vexed. If you break your arm, your soul was vexed. People say that you can't kill the soul. Well, let's go to Joshua chapter 10. Joshua chapter 10, and we're going to read verses 28 through 32. If you can't kill the soul, then Joshua is a very powerful man. Joshua chapter 10, we're going to read verses 28 through 32. When you get there, go ahead.
And that day Joshua took Makkedah and smote it with the edge of the sword. And the king thereof he utterly destroyed, them and all the souls that were therein. He let none remain. And he did to the king of Makkedah as he did unto the king of Jericho.
Now notice what it said Joshua did. He went to Makkedah and he destroyed the souls that were there. It says utterly destroyed them and all the souls that were therein. Meaning he killed people. He destroyed the body. Verse 29.
Then Joshua passed from Makkedah, and all Israel with him, unto Libnah, and fought against Libnah. And the Lord delivered it also, and the king thereof, into the hand of Israel. And he smote it with the edge of the sword, and all the souls that were therein, he let none remain in it, but did unto the king thereof, as he did unto the king of Jericho.
So he's telling you once again that he smote the souls. He killed the souls in Libnah here. So this is letting me know that, hey, the soul is the body. Just like when God created man, before he put that spirit of God in his nostrils, or the breath of life in his nostrils, he was a dead soul. But once he caused man to breathe, he became a living soul. Why? Because he's talking about the body. That's all he's talking about. Go ahead.
And Joshua passed from Libnah and all Israel with him unto Lachish. And he camped against it and fought against it. And the Lord delivered Lachish into the hand of Israel, which took it on the second day and smote it with the edge of the sword, and all the souls that were therein, according to all that he had done to Libnah.
All right, let's go to Revelation 16. We're going to wrap it up. But we know that the spirit that returns to God is nothing but the breath of life. And we're seeing that the soul is nothing but the body. That's all it is. Just like in the very beginning, Genesis said it all in the creation of man. Breathing to his nostrils, breath of life, he became a living soul. If you take away that breath, guess what? You're a dead soul. Wait until you get that spiritual body at the resurrection. Then you have a spiritual body. You have a spiritual soul that's going to live again. But until then, everybody's in the grave until the resurrection. Nothing returns to God but the breath of life. Everything else is back in the dirt where it came from in the first place. Revelation chapter 16, and we're going to read verse 3. There's so many different doctrines out there. People believe that there's people, we're actually waiting in heaven to come down to a body born in our mother's womb and come out that way. No. We came from the dust. We go back to the dust until the resurrection. Revelation chapter 16, verse 3. When you get there, go ahead.
And the second angel poured out his vial upon the sea, and it became as the blood of a dead man, and every living soul died in the sea.
Now here, at the Lord's second coming, when he's putting plagues upon the earth, he's going to destroy the sea, and all the living souls, all the living bodies, all the living things that were there are going to die at that time. And guess what? The Spirit of God will go back up to heaven where it came from in the first place. But that person, that body, is still down here on earth, turning back to dust. So that soul is turning back to dust where it came from in the first place. And that's the Spirit of God and the soul. I hope you have some understanding in Jesus' name.